Get that woman out of my house before I have her removed. Isobel Kincaid's voice cut across the grand foyer of the Kincaid estate, like a blade drawn slowly across glass. 240 guests filling the atrium of the Whistler mansion went silent. Champagne flutes froze midway to painted lips. A string quartet near the stone fireplace stopped mid-bar. The last note hung in the air and died alone. "Mum, she's my wife, your wife." Isobel repeated the word like it tasted of something rotten. A daycare worker from East Vancouver. A girl who takes the bus to work and shares a basement suite with her child. You brought that into my home, tonight, in front of every person who matters in this province. Thandiwe Mabaso stood perfectly still. Her hands were clasped in front of her. Her chin was level. She did not flinch, did not look away, did not give this woman a single thing she could use. I want her gone, now. But what Isobel Kincaid did not know, what nobody in that glittering room full of Vancouver's wealthiest families could have possibly guessed, was that a black sedan with diplomatic plates had just turned onto the private mountain road leading to the estate, and the man in the back seat had received a phone call 11 minutes ago that changed absolutely everything. 9 hours before the gala, Thandiwe Mabaso clocked out of Little Cedar's Early Learning Center on East Hastings. The classroom smelled like finger paint and apple slices. A 4-year-old named Oliver had cried for 40 minutes after his mother left that morning, and Thandi had sat cross-legged on the carpet holding him until his breathing slowed and he fell asleep against her shoulder. That was the job. $38,000 a year, no benefits until month 6, shoes that stuck to the floor from spilled juice, and it was entirely hers. Thandiwe Mabaso, 27 years old, South African-born Canadian since she was 9. Dark skin, close-cropped natural hair, a thin scar on her left wrist from a kitchen accident when she was 16. She walked to the bus stop in her work clothes. Gray joggers, a faded hoodie from UBC, sneakers with a hole near the left toe she kept meaning to replace. The number 20 bus was 12 minutes late. She stood in the rain and didn't bother with an umbrella because the one she owned had snapped 2 weeks ago, and a new one cost $14 she hadn't budgeted for. Her phone buzzed. "Gavin, we need to talk about tonight." She already knew that voice. That careful, measured tone he only used when his mother was involved. Gavin Kincaid, 31, tall, sandy-haired, jaw like his father's, conscience like nobody else's in his family. The youngest son of Isobel and Hugh Kincaid, founders of Kincaid Pacific Properties, the largest private real estate development firm in British Columbia. Gavin had met Thandi 14 months ago at a community fundraiser in Gastown. She was serving coffee. He asked her name. She told him. He came back the next day, and the day after, and every day that week, until she finally agreed to have dinner with him. "She told you I can't come," Thandi said. "Not a question. She told me if you walk through that door, she'll cut me out, publicly, in front of every developer, politician, and investor in the province." Thandi watched the rain streak down the bus shelter's plexiglass. A photo of Isi, her daughter, was tucked inside her phone case. 5 years old, gap-toothed grin, braids with yellow beads that clicked when she ran. Thandi's best friend Moira was watching Isi tonight. "Gavin, it's fine. I'll stay home. Isi and I will watch a movie." "No." His voice sharpened. "You are my wife. You belong beside me, everywhere, including there. Your mother doesn't see it that way. My mother doesn't see a lot of things. That's her failure, not yours." Silence. "I had a dress sent to the apartment," Gavin said quietly. "It's on the bed. Forest green. You'll look incredible." She found it an hour later. Simple. Elegant. It fit like it had been made for her. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror in their small apartment in Mount Pleasant, the one Gavin had chosen, the one his mother called a humiliation. Around her neck, on a thin silver chain, hung a small pendant, a caduceus. 2 serpents wound around a winged staff, her father's symbol. Warm from her skin. Thandi never talked about her father. When people asked, she said he was retired. He lived abroad, both technically true. Her father, Dr. Solomon Mabaso, had been one of the most celebrated cardiothoracic surgeons in the world. former chief of cardiac surgery at Groote Schuur Hospital in Cape Town, pioneer of a minimally invasive valve replacement technique now used in 37 countries. He had operated on heads of state, billionaires, and prime ministers. He currently sat on the boards of 3 international medical foundations and held an honorary professorship at the University of Toronto. But Thondi had decided years ago that she would build her own life on her own terms. No one would ever say she was handed anything. No one would ever look at her and see her father's name instead of her own work. So she took the bus to a mansion worth more than she would earn in several lifetimes, and she walked through the front door with her shoulders back and her eyes steady. The Kincaid Pacific Annual Charity Gala was Isobel's masterpiece. 240 guests filled the great hall of the family's Whistler estate. Provincial politicians, tech founders, mining executives, old Vancouver money and new Vancouver money, all of them dressed in black tie and drinking wine that cost more per bottle than Thandi's monthly rent. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the snow-capped coast mountains. Cedar beams soared overhead. White orchids and Douglas fir boughs lined every table. Isobel had spent 4 months planning every detail. Isobel Kincaid, 61 years old, silver blonde hair swept into a chignon, emerald earrings, a cream gown that cost $11,000 and looked like it cost more. She moved through the room the way a general moves through a battlefield, surveying, adjusting, controlling, every handshake calculated, every smile measured to the millimeter. Her husband, Hugh Kincaid, sat in a motorized wheelchair near the fireplace, 70 years old. Once a towering man, now diminished by a cardiac event 3 years ago that had nearly killed him. The surgery that saved his life had been performed by a specialist flown in from abroad, a surgeon whose name Hugh still kept on a card in his breast pocket, though he had never met the man's face. The procedure had been arranged through intermediaries. Hugh had been unconscious when the surgeon arrived and recovering when he left. That detail mattered. It mattered enormously. But nobody in that room knew it yet. Isobel saw Thandi the moment she walked in. Gavin beside her, hand on the small of her back, the forest green dress catching the candlelight, and Isobel moved. She crossed that room like a woman who had been waiting for a fight. "I told you." Isobel's voice was low, almost a whisper, but engineered to carry. "I told you she was not welcome here. Mum, she's my—" "Don't." Isobel raised one hand. A single, manicured finger. "Don't you dare finish that sentence in front of these people." She turned to Thandi, looked her up and down, not quickly, slowly, deliberately, the way a person examines something they have already decided to discard. "You look very put together tonight. For someone in your situation. Let me guess. Gavin paid for the dress, the shoes, the hair, everything. Because you couldn't afford a taxi to get here, let alone belong in this room. I'm not here to argue with you, Mrs. Kincaid. You're not here at all. That's the point." Isobel turned to the nearest cluster of guests, a provincial cabinet minister, 2 partners at a Bay Street law firm, a woman who ran one of Canada's largest private equity funds, all of them frozen, champagne in hand, watching. "My son," Isobel's voice climbed now, projecting, performing, "has chosen to legally bind himself to a woman who earns less in a year than the flower arrangements in this room. A woman with no education worth mentioning, no family worth knowing, and a child from God knows where. Her name is Essie." Gavin's voice cracked. "She's 5 years old. And she's my stepdaughter. She is not a Kincaid. She will never be a Kincaid, and neither will her mother." Isobel reached into a slim clutch and produced a folded document. Heavy cream paper. She placed it on the nearest table between an untouched crystal water glass. "Postnuptial agreement. My lawyers drafted it last Tuesday. 41 pages. She tapped the cover once. Thandiwe Mabaso waives all claims to Kincaid family asset. Every trust, every property, every account, every share. Any child not biologically a Kincaid receives nothing. Not now, not ever." Thandi looked at the document. She did not touch it. "There is a clause," Isobel continued, and her voice took on the tone of someone reading terms of surrender, "requiring my written approval before she attends any family function. Christmas, Easter, birthdays. A spread clause states that if she is deemed a reputational liability, the marriage may be annulled with zero compensation. Who decides what's a liability? Gavin asked. His hands were shaking. I do. Gavin picked up the document. Read for 10 seconds. His face went white, then red, then something darker. There's a section saying Thandi can't speak to media without your pre-approval, protecting the brand, and one that gives you veto power over where we live, protecting my son. This isn't a legal document, Mum. It's a cage. Isobel clasped her hands in front of her. Patient, rehearsed. She signs tonight, or you lose everything. The trust, $42 million, Gavin. Your position at Kincaid Pacific, the apartment I own, your inheritance, your future. She let the words settle, or she leaves, right now, quietly. And we pretend this little phase is over. 240 people, politicians, executives, lawyers, philanthropists. Not one of them spoke. Not one of them moved. The silence was enormous. It filled the room like smoke, and it said everything about every person standing in it. Thandi's fingers pressed into her palms, hard enough to leave marks, but her face gave nothing away. She had learned, in classrooms, in bus shelters, in every room where someone decided she didn't belong before she opened her mouth, that showing pain to people who wanted to see you break was the moment they won. Mrs. Kincaid. Thandi's voice was quiet and clear and steady. I graduated with honors from UBC's School of Education. I have worked with children in crisis for 4 years. I have never taken a cent from your family. I did not come here to be humiliated. Isobel smiled, thin and precise as a paper cut. And yet, scattered laughs near the bar. Quiet, nervous, ugly, each one a small, cowardly choice someone made in that moment. Gavin tore the agreement in half. The sound cut through the ballroom like a gunshot. We're done. He dropped the pieces on the floor. I'm done pretending you're anything other than what you are. Isobel's composure cracked. Just a flash. A vein pulsed at her temple. You're choosing her. Over $42 million. Over everything I built. I'm choosing decency. Over you. The room held its breath. Isobel straightened. She addressed the full room now, voice ringing off the cedar beams. Then hear me. As of tonight, Gavin Kincaid is no longer part of this family. Removed from the trust, terminated from Kincaid Pacific. He will vacate the apartment by Friday. He will not set foot in this house again. She looked at Thandi. Take him. You wanted him so badly. Now you have him with nothing. Hugh Kincaid sat in his wheelchair by the fireplace. He watched his only son be disowned. His hand gripped the armrest until his knuckles whitened. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked at the floor. Gavin took Thandi's hand. Fingers locked. He turned toward the door. 10 steps from the exit, Isobel called out, loud enough for everyone. You'll come back. When the money runs out and she shows you what she really is, they always do. Gavin didn't turn around, but at that exact moment, a black sedan was pulling through the estate's gated entrance, and the man in the back seat had already decided how he was going to walk into that room. They made it to the foyer. Heavy timber doors closed behind them. The noise of the gala became a muffled hum. Mountain air hit them through the cracked front entrance, cold, sharp, real. Thandi leaned against the wall, closed her eyes. Her hands were trembling, the deep, bone-level shaking that comes from holding yourself together in front of people who were trying deliberately, methodically, to take you apart. Gavin pressed his forehead against the opposite wall. I'm sorry. I thought if she saw you, she saw exactly who I am. That's the problem. A long silence. I have nothing now, Gavin whispered. She actually did it. You have me. You have Essie. That's not nothing. Gavin looked at her. Should I call your dad? Thandi hesitated. She touched the caduceus pendant through the fabric of her dress. Her father's symbol, warm against her collarbone. She had spent her entire adult life keeping his name separate from hers. She had never once used his reputation to open a door or win an argument. She needed to know that everything she had was earned. But tonight was different. Tonight was not about pride. It was about something bigger. I'll call him myself. 1 ring. 2. Hey, my girl. Baba. Her voice cracked. Just that one word and everything she had held together threatened to come undone. I know, Solomon said. Gavin called me 20 minutes ago. I'm already here. What? I'm in the car park, sweetheart. I've been sitting here for 5 minutes deciding whether to come in as a doctor or come in as a father. Thandi almost laughed. What did you decide? I decided to come in as a father, because that's worse. The line went dead. From outside, through the heavy front doors, they heard a car door close, then footsteps on gravel. Slow, measured, unhurried. The footsteps of a man who had walked into rooms far more dangerous than this one and left every single time with the outcome he intended. The doorbell rang, one long chime that echoed through stone and timber. Thandi opened the door. Dr. Solomon Mabasso stepped inside, 63 years old, 6'4", broad-shouldered, silver-templed, wearing a charcoal suit tailored in London. No jewelry except a watch, no flash. Just presence, the kind that makes rooms go quiet without a word spoken. He looked at Thandi first, cupped her face with both hands, kissed her forehead. You all right, my girl? She nodded. If she spoke, she would break. Solomon looked at Gavin, extended his hand, held the grip. You did the right thing. I'm proud of you, son. Gavin's eyes went glassy. Solomon straightened his jacket, looked toward the gala doors. The muffled sound of 240 voices filtered through. Which one is she? You can't miss her. Let's go have a conversation. He pushed open both doors, wide. The sound cut every conversation dead. 240 heads turned. The quartet stopped. Solomon Mabasso walked into that room the way a man walks into a room when he has spent 40 years saving lives and has absolutely no patience left for cruelty. Isobel was near the bar, champagne refreshed, laughing with a developer about something that wasn't funny. She glanced toward the entrance. Her laugh died. She didn't recognize him, not yet. But Hugh Kincaid did. Hugh sat up in his wheelchair. His face went pale, then flushed. He gripped both armrests and his mouth fell open. Isobel. Hugh's voice came out raw and urgent, louder than anyone had heard him speak in 3 years. Isobel, stop. She turned, irritated. Hugh, not now. That man. Hugh was pointing. His hand trembled. That is Dr. Solomon Mabasso. Nothing. Isobel. That is the surgeon who saved my life. The silence that followed was the loudest sound that room had ever held. Solomon crossed the floor. The crowd parted. They didn't know him, but every person there knew what authority looked like when it walked toward you. He stopped directly in front of Isobel, close enough that she had to look up, Mrs. Kincaid. His voice was deep, unhurried, and carried to every corner of that silent room. We haven't met. But 3 years ago, your husband suffered a catastrophic aortic dissection. His surgical team in Vancouver gave him a 12% chance of survival. I was flown in from Cape Town on 18 hours' notice. I operated for 11 hours. I replaced his ascending aorta, repaired the valve, and kept his heart beating when every monitor in that room said it was finished. He paused. Let every word land. Your husband is alive because of these hands. He held them up, steady. The hands of a surgeon. My daughter, the woman you just called uneducated, the woman you ordered removed from this room, the woman you told has no family worth knowing, is Thandiwe Mabasso, my only child. Isobel's champagne glass tilted. A thin stream of wine ran over the rim and onto the stone floor. She didn't notice. She chose not to use my name. She chose to build her life without my money, my connections, or my reputation. Every single thing she has, she earned on her own. And I have never been prouder of a human being in my life. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a card, placed it on the bar with 2 fingers. Dr. Solomon Mabasso, Cardiothoracic Surgery, Groot Schuur Hospital, University of Toronto Faculty of Medicine. Isobel looked at the card, then at Hugh. Hugh stared back with an expression that contained every unsaid thing from 3 years of silence. You knew? Isobel whispered. I knew his name. I didn't know his face. I never met him. I was unconscious. Hugh's voice broke. But I carry his card every single day because that man gave me back my life, and you just threw his daughter out of our home. Isobel's knees buckled. She grabbed the bar. The champagne flute slipped from her fingers and shattered on the stone. Sharp final. A gavel on a verdict with no appeal. Solomon did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. 240 people doing it for him. Mrs. Kincaid, I have operated on prime ministers and presidents. I have held human hearts in my hands. I have told families their loved ones would live, and I have told families their loved ones would not. In all of that, in 40 years of medicine, I have never once judged a person by anything other than whether they were decent. He let the silence hold. Tonight I watched a recording my son-in-law sent me of you degrading my daughter in front of 200 people. I have also, in the past hour, received phone calls from 3 journalists. One from the Globe and Mail, one from CBC, one from a podcast with 4 million subscribers. All of them have the same question. How does the Kincaid family treat the daughter of the man who saved Hugh Kincaid's life? Isobel's face drained of color in stages. First the flush left her cheeks. Then the composure left her jaw. Then her eyes went wide. I haven't returned their calls yet, Solomon said. I'm deciding. Gerald, Isabel's general counsel, a thin man named Lawrence Fisk, who had been standing near the bar reading his phone for the past several minutes, closed his eyes. He had known. A Google alert. He hadn't warned her. Lawyers always know when to build distance from a sinking ship. Dr. Mabasso. Isabel's voice came out thin, small. A voice nobody in that room had ever heard from Isobel Kincaid. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. I had no idea. You had no idea she was someone's daughter? Or you assumed nobody who mattered would ever find out how you treat people you consider beneath you? The things I said. Emotions were running high. You drafted a 41-page legal document last week. You planned this. That is not emotion. That is premeditation. Isobel tried again. Extended a hand. Surely we can discuss this privately. There's no need for this to become public? Solomon looked at the hand. He did not take it. You humiliated my daughter publicly. In front of every person in this room. You don't get a private resolution. Then something happened that nobody expected. Hugh Kincaid powered his wheelchair forward. The motor whirred in the silence. 240 people watched the old man cross the floor, slowly, deliberately, until he stopped beside Solomon. Hugh looked at Thandi, who had followed her father into the room and now stood near the entrance with Gavin. Come here, child. Thandi walked forward, slowly. Hugh took her hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes were fierce. I owe your father my life. Every breath I have taken for 3 years belongs to him. And my wife. He looked at Isobel, and the look contained something ancient and devastating. My wife has just spat on that gift in front of everyone I know. He turned back to Thandi. His voice shook. I am sorry. For tonight, for every time before tonight, for every silence that was louder than what was said. Then he looked at Gavin. You're a better man than I raised you to be, and that's entirely your own doing. Isobel stood alone. Nobody moved toward her. Nobody spoke to her. 240 guests looked at their shoes, their phones, the mountain view, anywhere but at the woman who 60 seconds ago had controlled every room she entered. Solomon put his arm around Thandi. Gavin stood on her other side. Hugh wheeled himself toward them. The pair of them moved together toward the front door. Behind them, the room stayed frozen. The first text was sent at 9:51 p.m. By midnight, the whole country would know. It started with texts, then tweets, then the recording. Someone at the gala who had been filming from the moment Isobel pointed her finger at Thandi. The audio was crisp. Every word perfectly clear. Isabel's voice, sharp and unmistakable, calling Thandi uneducated, ordering her removed, disowning her son. The clip hit social media at 11:30 p.m. Pacific. By 6 a.m. Eastern, it had 4 million views. By noon, CBC, CTV, and Global were running it. The Globe and Mail published first. The headline that stuck came from an investigative reporter named Janine Tremblay, who had been following corporate governance stories in Canadian real estate for years. Kincaid Pacific Chair caught on audio in racist tirade against son's wife. The woman she targeted is the daughter of the surgeon who saved her husband's life. The story didn't stop at the gala. Former employees came forward. 4 of them. All racialized. One described being told by Isobel that certain clients preferred to deal with people who looked like them. Another provided emails in which Isobel instructed HR to prioritize cultural alignment, language everyone in the industry understood. A third described being passed over for a promotion that went to a less qualified white colleague. A formal complaint filed in 2021 with the BC Human Rights Tribunal resurfaced. It had been settled quietly with a strict NDA. The audio made the NDA legally vulnerable. Kincaid Pacific shares dropped 9% Monday, 14% by Wednesday close. Institutional investors, pension funds, university endowments began quietly divesting, not because they suddenly cared, because toxicity is bad for quarterly returns. The board convened Thursday. 7 members voted to demand Isobel's immediate resignation as chair. 2 abstained. Both were her personal appointees. The motion carried. Isobel resisted for 48 hours. She sat in the Whistler estate calling board members, calling lawyers, calling anyone who had ever owed her a favor. Nobody answered. Hugh broke through Saturday morning. He wheeled into her study at 7 a.m. and said 6 words. "If you don't resign, I leave." She resigned Monday. The public apology was recorded in the estate's library. Navy blazer, pearl earrings, a prepared statement read from a teleprompter with the enthusiasm of a woman reading her own obituary. "I deeply regret the hurtful and inappropriate remarks I made at the Kincaid Pacific Charity Gala. My words do not reflect the values of this company or this family. I take full responsibility and am committed to meaningful change." The internet responded the way the internet always responds to insincere apologies. The top comment liked 40,000 times. She's sorry she got caught. The BC Human Rights Tribunal reopened its investigation. A class action was filed 3 weeks later by 5 former employees. Damages sought $28 million. Gavin was offered the interim CEO position. He accepted on one condition, that Thandi would have no involvement in the decision. He wanted to earn it the way she had earned everything, on his own. Thandi went back to work at Little Cedars the following Monday. She clocked in at 7 a.m. She sat on the carpet with Oliver, who had a new tooth and wanted everyone to see it. When a reporter from the Vancouver Sun called the center and asked for a comment, Thandi said 8 words, "My kids need me." That hasn't changed. It became its own headline. Solomon established the Grace Mabasso Foundation, named after Thandi's mother, a human rights lawyer in Cape Town who had died when Thandi was 11. $10 million endowment. Scholarships for single mothers pursuing careers in education and healthcare. Thandi helped design the application process. She took no public credit. Gavin and Thandi renewed their vows on a Saturday in October. Small ceremony, 32 guests. A garden in North Vancouver overlooking the inlet. Solomon walked Thandi down the aisle. No Kincaid family members were invited except one. Hugh Kincaid arrived early in his wheelchair, carrying a handwritten letter and a stuffed orca whale for Essie. Essie was the flower girl. She scattered petals with fierce concentration, then turned to the guests and announced, "My grandpa fixes hearts and my mum teaches kids." Nobody corrected her. She was right on both counts. 6 months later, Isobel Kincaid resigned as chair and never returned to the boardroom she had controlled for 23 years. The class action settled for $19 million. The Human Rights Tribunal investigation resulted in a compliance order requiring mandatory anti-discrimination training, an independent equity officer, and quarterly reports for 3 years. Isobel's personal net worth dropped from $600 million to roughly $380 million after the stock crash, settlement, and legal fees. She moved from the Whistler estate to a smaller property on Vancouver Island. She completed a court-ordered restorative justice program. She attended every session. She sat in the back. She said nothing. Hugh Kincaid filed for separation 5 months after the gala. In his statement, he said he could no longer share a life with someone who had treated the family of the man who saved his life with such contempt. He moved to a condo in West Vancouver. He calls Solomon once a month. They have never met in person. Hugh says he's not ready. Solomon says there's no rush. Gavin Kincaid was confirmed as permanent CEO. Under his leadership, Kincaid Pacific established a minority business development fund supporting Indigenous and Black-owned enterprises across BC. He hired the company's first Indigenous vice president, a woman named Claire Tutu, who had been passed over twice during Isobel's tenure. The company's share price recovered within 14 months and reached an all-time high. When a reporter asked what had changed, Gavin said 5 words that became their own headline. The leadership. Everything else was already here. Thandi was promoted to lead educator at Little Cedars, 8 months after the gala. A promotion her director called overdue by 2 years. She and Gavin bought a townhouse in East Vancouver, 3 bedrooms, a small backyard with a slide, modest by Kincaid standards, perfect by theirs. She never gave a single interview about the gala. Solomon Mabasso semi-retired the following spring. He now splits his time between the foundation and his granddaughter. He picks Essie up from school on Thursdays. They get hot chocolate at the same cafe every week. He tells her stories about her grandmother Grace, about her courage, about the cases she argued that changed South African law, about the way she laughed. He makes sure Essie knows exactly where she comes from. Lawrence Fisk, the general counsel, quietly resigned and joined a firm in Calgary. He never commented publicly. And Isobel Kincaid sits today in a house on Vancouver Island that is significantly smaller than the one she lost. No staff, no gala invitations, no one calling to ask her opinion. She has not spoken to Gavin in 11 months. The last known photograph of her shows a woman in a community center classroom in Nanaimo, wearing a visitor badge, sitting in the back row of a restorative justice seminar, learning the kind of basic lessons about dignity and respect that most decent people understand by the time they're 5. So here's my question for you. If you were standing in that room, one of those 240 guests, and you watched Isobel tear into Thandi, would you have been Hugh, sitting in silence, gripping his armrest? Would you have been the crowd, looking at your shoes? Or would you have been the one person who stepped forward and said something? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to know. If this story made you feel something, anger, satisfaction, hope, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't, because stories like this are coming every week. And remember this, the way you treat people when you think nobody important is watching, that's who you actually are. The right people don't need you to prove your worth. They already see it. And that's worth more than any inheritance on earth.